Today we're going to be talking about what progression looks like. I've been reading Today and Tomorrow by Henry Ford, and in the book he talks about all these amazing, huge manufacturing processes that he has going on, and you look at that, you're like, oh my god, how did he get there? Like, you imagine that he just came up with all these ideas all at once, and you forget the numerous steps that happen when you put progress in over time to slowly develop something. So for many people, the car manufacturing line looks like this. You have a bunch of robotic arms, a bunch of stuff happening, some cables. You have no idea what's happening. You're looking at that, you're like, how did we get there? Like, you just don't even understand, you don't fathom what's behind it because you haven't spent 4 years in college even studying it, and yet I still don't fully understand everything that's happening here. So we're going to be breaking down some of the early steps that Ford went through to get where he is now. So this film is called The American Road from the Library of Congress, and
of the Model T down to where everybody could buy it. He figured that the more cars he made and sold, the cheaper he could sell each one. To work on this idea. In those days, each car had horses. There was a different crew for each car, and the same crew stayed on the car until it was finished.
Nothing really too technical going on there. It's just a craftsman building out a machine. And you look at that and you're like, okay, I see what's happening. They're assembling the pieces. Makes sense, like how we logically got there. No big like innovations took place. To make the car itself, some innovations took place, but this is standard craftsmanship that's been going on for all of human civilization.
That meant duplication of effort and a lot of time wasted. So they tried moving the men from car to car. Each man had a special job to do, and as soon as he finished it, he moved on to the next car and did.
So we're here, just want to talk quickly about not necessarily accepting the situation that you're at and always looking for a way to improve, a way to better it. You are going to stumble along the way and find out that like the method you currently have is better than this one, but as you slowly move on and you start trying new things, you'll get a feel for where it's actually at, what's going to work best for you. And some own personal stuff, wrestling, the moves I've used so many that I've like blown up in my face and got me pinned, but over time I learned what worked well. Diets, I have gotten burned by diets. Like, I tried veganism and that effed my body up a lot. I was bloated, lacked protein, felt like crap, and the only thing is I didn't realize it at the time because my mind wasn't working properly. So my brother came to me one day, he's like, dude, you need to stop doing this. You don't look good. And I'm like, okay. But like, you try things out, you get a feel for it, and right now you also have to retry stuff in case you didn't do it right the first time. Right now I'm retrying the carnivore diet. Even though it burned me badly last time I did it, I completely like killed my gut out. Took months to rehab it to get the good gut bacteria back there, to get my body actually digesting food properly. And like for the first couple of weeks and months that I did it, it worked wonderful. But I think it was due to the extremely high amount of energy drinks and the artificial sweeteners in them and the flavorings that completely killed my gut bacteria. So now I'm retrying carnivore diet because sometimes you have to do that. And I'm also adding green tea in, which is, I think it's the most yin food, and according to Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, red meat is the most yang food. So yin yang balance. I'm going to make more videos talking about that, but let's get back.
Same thing there. That was better, but it still took 12 and a half hours to assemble each Model T. Henry Ford watched it for a while, then he had an inspiration. Instead of moving the men past the cars, why not move the cars past the men? So on one hot August morning, they tried it that way. A husky young fella put a rope over his shoulder, and Henry Ford called, "Let's go."
You can't worry about looking like a dumbass while you're trying new stuff, because when you break the status quo, when you venture to do something that other people aren't doing, a lot of people are going to think you're silly until they start seeing the results you're getting, and then they're going to be like, oh, tell me more about that. So, I mean, having a guy literally haul a car around the factory, like, he kind of looks like a dumbass right now, hauling a heavy car, but, like, I'm sure back then it was even a more foolish idea to most people, but you have to be willing to mix things up in order to experiment and get new things. Or get new results. And then you have to see if those results are good or bad, and then form a scientific, kind of like the scientific method, where you form a way of testing your hypothesis, you test it, and then you analyze it, and then you revision it. And I have another video on the channel talking about that. But if you learn from your mistakes, then they're not really mistakes, they're just lessons.
And at that very moment, as the workmen began to fasten the parts onto the slowly moving car, the assembly line was born, a technique that was to revolutionize mass production.
Yeah, right there. The guy just carrying the car. Like, this idea must have seemed so silly to them. I mean, this dude's smiling in the background, even though these are most likely actors. Completely revolutionized all of manufacturing in the whole world. This right here. But this is how it started.
All over the world. Once they found that the idea would work, they began to improve it, refine it.
I also just want to point out how simple these steps were that actually led to it, through the eventual testing and fixing and retesting and refixing. Like, as you saw, they went from benches to where one person would build the car, to benches where one person would do one part in each car, to moving benches, or moving the car through while one person did each part. Like, the image I showed earlier of all the robotic arms didn't come about overnight. Like, it is a slow progression like this, but over time, over the course of 10 years, the results you will see are incredible.
They rolled a chassis down a single line of track, pushing it from crew to crew. And the more expert they became at this new method, the faster the cars came off the assembly line, and the price of the Model T began to drop. They tried the same idea on all the various parts of the car and created what were called sub-assemblies. Each man on the line became a specialist. He did one thing, and he did it perfectly, and passed the work along to the next man.
One of the geniuses of this method also puts the person on a clock, so that they now have to do the task as fast as, not as fast as they can, but at a certain speed, or else the line will fall behind. So it gets rid of lazy employees from slacking, or people doing less work than what they normally could.
Minute by minute, production was winning the battle against wasted time and wasted effort. Parts were fed to the workmen by gravity slides, so they wouldn't have to stop and wait for new parts.
No assembly lines, no giant tracks moving things around. Like, something as simple as just gravity feeding and having wheels roll down. Like, this is how things eventually built up to having giant cars clamped on tracks that are then flown around the factories. Play. Give me a second. Okay. There we go.
Then they put the parts on moving conveyor belts. This was a great step forward, because now they could regulate the flow of work and keep it moving at a constant rate of speed. And the conveyor belts grew longer and more complex as they moved the work from place to place in the huge shops. They became
Tiny improvement by tiny improvement is how most things are done, and over time you wind up with something that looks completely different. And I love these videos for showing how things have gotten to the point where we are now, because you kind of look at the world, we look at, like, my computer I'm filming this on, I'm like, this thing is a magic box. I have 4 years of an engineering degree, and this is a magic box I don't really understand that well. I can code, but the computer itself is a magic box. Like actually understanding how it came about, how it was made, how it works. It's so interesting because it also allows you to return to first principles and see if somewhere along the line better improvement could have been made, which would then branch off into a whole different area.
Fantastic masterpieces of planning and engineering. But the battle against wasted time and wasted effort was being won. The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 40 seconds. And what Henry Ford had foreseen happened. Mass production and the assembly line drove the price of the Model T down from $850 to $300. Now everybody...
Yeah, now it just shows how poor roads were back then. But going back to what I said earlier about how going back to first principles, understanding stuff, understanding what people want. Say you were back then 1900s and you thought, well, people like wagons. I'm gonna make the best wagon I possibly can, and then you like try to optimize the wagon to the utmost degree because you think people want wagons. Like, no, people actually want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, and the wagon is just the current method people are using for this. So if we can put an engine in there instead of a horse, it would get there faster. You don't see like camera companies. We didn't keep trying to perfect the film paper that you use today. You know, some people still use it. We didn't keep trying to perfect that in the digital age. We went back to, what are the principles of what people want in a photograph? They want now to be able to digitize it. And we had to like, it kind of branched over here to like the photo paper and stuff like that. And then we had to go back to like this point and then go off from here and start developing the camera for the digital lens. And then it progresses from there and everything. But anyways, I love seeing these videos, seeing the progression of how things came about and just showing you like how a little bit of effort over time compounded ends up with these huge results. Because so many times you look at stuff and it just feels overwhelming. You look at like a giant factory like this and you're like, how? Like, how did that even come about? And because you don't know how, it makes you kind of feel like you're dumb or you don't have any chance of doing something as grand in your own life. And then you look back to like the steps that made it happen. You're like, I can do that. And then once you look at that, you're like, I can do that. And you're like, what else can I do? Like, because if you show me, like, I'm gonna pause for a second, go back to the image. If I showed you this image and I said, make this happen, you're gonna be like, what? How? I can't. Like, I literally cannot make that happen. If I go and I show you the steps on how that happened, if like, have guys make this on a bench, have guys only do one job while they make this on a bench, have a guy like haul this down with a rope on his back, and I show you the steps of how to do each one of those, you're like, oh, I see how we get here. But like understanding that allows you to realize how the world was made and how it's just made by people like us. Like, no one that brilliant really made this. Like, it's the subtle progression of many people fixing one thing at a time. But like, the guy who made this whole thing happen wasn't some outlandish genius that no one can ever like live up to. Just a bunch of little progressions that happened. And understanding that like makes you feel more empowered and be like, oh, I could do that too. So I'm gonna leave the video there. Peace out.